All right, we just wanted to be able to spend a little time here in a quick video kind of debunking the IUL myths out there as it relates to whole life versus IUL and the infinite banking concept. There's a lot of half-truth out there that, that in the right context it could be true, but overall is not necessarily true. But you're led to believe that it's always the truth, right? In type of a thing. So I want to be able to go through a few of these, some of the major ones, the bullet points, and kind of go from there, type of thing. So with that, let's first talk about kind of whole life versus IUL, right? A whole life policy, is designed to have a guaranteed interest, guaranteed cost, guaranteed death benefit, and the premiums are rigid, meaning that the only way that the insurance company can really offer that guarantee is they got to know exactly what they're going to receive, so that actuarially they could figure out really how they can make profit, right? And so as a result, it's not really that flexible. The premium. Unless you got a paid up additions rider, there really is no flexibility on the premium, right? It is what it is, okay? Now that's why universal life was created, and specifically index universal life, but universal life was created to create a flexible premium policy, right? And and as far as an index universal life, the interest is based off of a market index, and so it can fluctuate, right? You don't always get the same return, but the big thing is that it's guaranteed against loss, but you can get the upside of the market. Okay, it has a fluctuating cost, meaning that instead of having there's a cost curve, age 0, age 100 to get type of a thing. What a whole life policy does is they average that out and create one flat cost. Whereas an index universal life, or really universal life in general, follows an up and down. It's not a straight up. It's an up and down curve of cost, right? And so it follows the real risk of the policy. In some years, even though you're older, it could be cheaper than the previous year because there's less people that pass away at say 60 than 59 or whatever the case is. And so it's not a guaranteed up, and anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but there is a guaranteed death benefit, not always for the life of the policy, usually 15 to 20 years. So anyway, those are kind of the main differences between the two. But to go into kind of to debunk some of the myths that are perpetuated with these types of policies that just aren't true, is the first one is that it's an annual renewable term. I kind of just, like I said, I got ahead of myself. An annual renewable term really means, for the most part, that it renews and increases. They want you to believe that it increases every single year, and it doesn't. It fluctuates. Even if the premium renews each year, and that in that definition of annual renewable, that could be true, but don't let it lead you to believe that it means that it's going to an annual renewable increasing term every year. Okay, it does trend upwards, but it doesn't mean that it always goes upwards, and it depends on how you structure it. In my other videos, I talk about utilizing different death benefit options and different things to be able to have control over some of these costs, and so type of a thing. Because one of the things that is talked about, that the policy will eat itself up, right? That the cost will get so expensive on the back end that it will just eat up all your cash value, and then it'll lapse because unless you're putting more premium in, that it'll just die, right? And there's horror stories out there if that's true. And in the right context, this could happen, right? And I probably do another video on this because I want to keep this video short. But depending on how that policy was structured, it could have been set up to fail from the very get-go. And years ago, 30 years ago, when these policies really 30, 40 years ago, when these policies really came out and became popular, they, quite honestly, they were sold improperly. And as a result, there are legitimate stories of people losing these policies, but that is really a far-fetched reality if it's properly structured and with an index universal life where you're getting greater return over time than say a 4% fixed interest rate that a traditional universal life policy had. Then that becomes there's very little risk that would ever happen if you have the right policy structure and if you're getting the return. Every single time I hear a story like this, it's always related to a universal life policy that was set up 20, 30, 40 years ago, and it was set up to fail unintentionally, but it was set up to fail from the get-go, right? And that's where my expertise can come in to help you wade through those kinds of questions. The second thing that's often talked about is the cost can go up at the insurance company's whim, right? And it makes it sound like that they do this, that it's always that's what they do. They suck you in at a certain cost and they raise the cost on you down the road, right? That's not true necessarily, right? Do they have some flexibility in changing? Do they have a guaranteed cost and a current cost? Yes, there's a difference there, right? But all the companies that I ever deal with, some of them been around for over 100 years, have never once used the guaranteed cost. Whereas a lot of these other videos out there make it sound like that's the norm and they do it all the time. And it's just not true. It's just not true. So the current cost, although there's fluctuations, it's a predetermined fluctuation that you can see and track that virtually never changes throughout the life of the policy, right? Is there somebody that could find an example where that happened? I'm sure there is, but I don't deal with those types of companies. And in my 20 plus years of experience, I've never seen a scenario where an insurance company all of a sudden just raised their costs out of the blue. Right? So although there's maybe some technical truth to this, in reality it just doesn't happen. Okay? 0% return negatively affects the policy, right? They say, oh, well, you get 0%. There's never a true zero because you still have insurance cost. Well, once again, half truth, because technically that's true. That your zero, if you got a zero, you still have insurance costs, so your technical total return would be a negative. But compared to what? That's the question I ask. Compared to what? What's your alternative? To get a guaranteed 4% in fixed return in a whole life policy, and that because in another video I've talked about how the historical returns are a lot of times triple the return or more than what your average fixed 4% interest rate that you might get in a whole life, right? Guaranteed cost. Now I know there's dividends and things like that bump that up, but it's not anything significant, right? And so yes, so you could say, hey, and if you take a look at any one particular year, could you say, hey, there was a quote unquote negative return in that one particular year? That you could probably make an argument that yes, that is true. But what did it do? What were the returns the previous 5 years, right? Or 2 years, or however many before? If the returns if that 1 year out of 5 was down, what is my total return over that 5 years? I can't guarantee it, right? But I could show you historical return after historical return, where your overall return over a 3, 5, 10 year period would be way more than a negative return, right? I mean, if on average you're getting double and triple the returns of the typical 4%, right? Then if the previous 3-4 years were before that zero were double and triple the returns, that 1-0 year, you're still far ahead. You're basically more than double the return of that fixed 4%, right? So is it really a negative? Yes, in that one particular year, but overall, no. You're still way further ahead of the game than your average 4% guaranteed interest in a whole life. Okay? Hidden fees. In fact, this always makes me laugh because an IUL is actually an IUL illustration breaks down the fees in a way more transparent way. They break down every little thing. There's really 3 basic fees. They make it sound like there's all these hidden fees like that's not disclosed, right? And that's not true. Every illustration breaks down all the fees. A whole life policy does not break down really anything other than they say, here's your policy cost, right? Well, what goes into that policy cost? There's other things. There's premium expenses and the different charges and admin charges and everything that is in there, but it's all combined together in one insurance cost. An IUL illustration could do the same thing, but no, they break it down and show you exactly column by column what the costs would be. So this idea of hidden fees is ridiculous. Now, is it hidden because the client didn't necessarily look at the illustration and look at that? Well, yeah, maybe, but that's not because it's hidden. It's right there. There just wasn't due diligence done, right? So anyway, bottom line is IULs are actually transparent to a fault in that area. Okay, increased cost of policy to make up for returns. Is the last one here. It's kind of just the idea that as policy costs increase, it really reduces your return because there's more policy costs. Well, sometimes we can get lost or confused when we're just looking at percentages and not looking at the dollars in our account, right? If on the back end my policy costs are up, but I have $100,000 or $200,000 or $1 million in my policy, right? A certain percentage on $1 million is going to be a lot bigger than the same percentage on 100,000, right? So policy costs, compared to what you're gaining in your account on the back end, which on the back end is when you're gaining the most interest because you have the most amount of money in it. Right? So anyway, there's probably a few more that I'm missing here, but these are the ones that I really kind of hear on a consistent basis that like I said, in the right context could be true or are true depending on in the way you're looking at it, but just overall not necessarily something to worry about or be concerned of because it's being presented in a way as if it's such a negative thing, when the reality is in the right context, with the right structure, with the the proper funding, with all these different types of things, none of these things are really relevant, right? So put your comments below, ask me more questions, tell me what you've heard and we'll address them, type of a thing. And let's go make some money, create some wealth, and have some fun.